Welcome to MATCHplay, where every episode starts with a spark and ends with insight that can only come from personal experience at the highest level. Let's tee up some good conversation. I'm Thad Miller, and welcome back to MATCHplay. Today's conversation is about selling a business and realizing the decision isn't just about the transaction. It's about what happens afterwards. Our guest today is my friend, Michael Bosway, longtime leader of City Securities Corporation, a firm with nearly a century of history and a reputation built over generations. After more than 30 years with the firm, including serving as its CEO, Mike led the company through its sale to Stifel, a fast-growing national brokerage. But this wasn't a walk-away moment. Mike, along with much of the leadership team, stayed on after the acquisition and continued to lead inside a much larger organization. This is a conversation about not just selling a business, but choosing the right partner and living with that decision long after the deal closes. Mike, thanks for joining. I'm so grateful to have you on here.
I'm really glad to be here, Thad.
Oh, I love it. Well, I've got the matches. We're going to light a match, and I'm going to ask you three quick questions. I hope I don't set off the sprinklers here, but let's go. All right. What's a favorite golf course you've ever played?
Bandon Dunes.
All right. How many hole-in-ones have you had?
0.
Oh, he's still on the hunt for the first one. I'm sorry, that's a sore subject. What was your first job, Mike?
I worked for Arthur Anderson and Company. First professional job?
No, first job like delivering papers or, shucking sweet corn, whatever it is.
Taking care of baseball fields.
Taking care of baseball, like mowing and putting down the lines and
putting down the lines, raking the infield, doing the mounds.
Anything particularly more difficult that you didn't think would be difficult in doing that? Like, what was the hardest thing to do in maintaining a baseball field?
Being an infielder myself, it was making sure that the infield wasn't full of rocks and other things that would not give you a true bounce.
Or growing the grass a little heavier just so that ball slows down so you can field it.
Yeah.
You didn't want it hard and fast like a good fairway.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. Well, give us a little background on your history of like when you started, before you got to City Securities and a little bit on your resume.
Yeah, so I grew up in a military family. We moved around 15 times when I was a kid. Spent my last 3 years in high school in Louisiana and ended up was looking at baseball scholarships down there and to schools that weren't very good academically. My parents are originally from Ohio. I ended up going to the University of Dayton and walking on and making it and playing baseball there. So that's kind of how I ended up there.
All right. Yeah, flyer. Yeah.
A flyer.
Yeah.
And then
my associate broker is a flyer. I'll have to let him know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Flyer up.
Yeah.
And I met with 2 months to go in my senior year. I was headed on to graduate school at Ohio State and met this girl. She was a year behind me, and she's the reason that I'm in Indianapolis. After graduate school, looked at opportunities in Chicago and Atlanta and New York, and thought I'm going to try to make my way in Indianapolis. And if it doesn't work, those opportunities that I'm passing up would probably still be there. And kind of the rest was history. I started with Arthur Anderson and their consulting division. And a year later, I really wanted to get into the financial services business. A year later, I started to look around. And I would say that the naivety of a young 23-year-old coming out of graduate school with not much work experience, not knowing what a company like Arthur Anderson would look like on your resume, I found out when I went to look in the financial services business. They loved that I'd been at Arthur Anderson.
Okay.
So looked at a bunch of different firms, ended up choosing City Securities, and as they say, the rest was history.
Wow. So that was your first job, essentially in financial services. You rose all the way to CEO and obviously helped them find somebody to That's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you and I talked briefly about, I know a few of the people that were there before you from my fraternity, and they were definitely pillars of the industry for sure, and good people for sure. What do you think made City Securities such a respected firm over that long period of time?
There are probably many things I could mention, but to me it's easy. The founder of the firm, J. Dwight Peterson,
Hmm.
uh, he I was with the firm for about 5 years, and then he passed away. But I got a chance to know him a little bit. But his reputation, and his work ethic, and his foundational base that he laid for the company of integrity and trust was second to none. And when you're in a financial services business like the one that we were in, the ones that we were in, we weren't in just one area. Uh, it it takes a generation to build integrity and trust with your client base, and it, as Warren Buffett used to say, it takes about 60 seconds to lose all of that.
Sure.
But it was him who laid this foundation for all of us, and you could sense it, and you could sense that it was your responsibility to, whether you're an advisor, an investment banker, a staff person, you could feel it there that this was something that needed to be carried on, and everybody had the responsibility to do it.
Well, we in this, this podcast, it comes up repeatedly that culture is such a critical thing, and it's obviously intangible, but it's tangible when you see it, right? And
Yeah,
when somebody's looking to acquire your business, they need to feel that good culture. It matters. It doesn't show up on a P&L, and it doesn't show up in EBITDA, but it does, because that's what gets you a higher EBITDA, or it gets you, better financials. But and having him start that, and I know it was a generational business too. Like, did his son work there, and
yep.
down the line?
Yep.
Mm.
His son was one of our, I think we had five presidents throughout our 95-year history, and he was one of those, and ended up moving from there to chairman of the board, where he served as the chairman for 30 years.
It's amazing.
But
So,
this idea of culture is an asset. You
yeah.
think about a business like ours, your assets walk out the door every day. When I knew that they were walking out every day, I wanted them to walk out and be proud to be on the street when somebody asked them what they did and where they worked.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of culture that I think we had. And again, our responsibility to carry it on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And before, when you were a leader, at its peak, before you sold, like, how many people were in the organization that were working with clients and their, wealth management?
Yeah, well, we had about 275 people across the three businesses that we had, um, most of which were client facing.
Hmm.
So I would say, we probably had I wouldn't say most, I would say 150 of those 275 were client facing, whether they're
Right.
assistants or whether they're, the advisor or investment banker
Hmm.
or insurance agent.
Okay. Yeah, that's incredible. So at what point did you start to feel, when did you actually sell? So you started there, you were CEO. When did the transaction happen? And then how much before that were you thinking that, we need to think about making a change here?
Yeah. So there were, we had a holding company, City Financial Corporation, of
Hmm.
which City Securities was the biggest piece of it. But we had three other wholly owned subs, and one of them was spun off to shareholders. The other two were sold separately from City Securities. Stifel wasn't interested in those two businesses, but so that was in January of 17 when we closed the last of the three transactions. So prior to that, uh, we we had a strategic retreat every year down in Florida, and one of the things we always talked about was the landscape. And when you talk about the landscape, you've got these two paths: do we remain independent, or do we go and find a partner? We always went through that exercise with actually no interest in going down the path of finding a partner. And
Yeah.
so landscape started to change when we came out of the recession, the Great Recession. Of course, politicians look for blame when you have something like that happen.
So
And what
2008,
that,
2009, and
yep,
then, okay.
yeah. So what that results in is a higher level of legal and regulatory cost, and that becomes permanent. It never goes down once you ratchet up. When you get all these edicts from Washington, it wasn't really at that point. It was about 2014 when we actually weren't thinking about it necessarily, but we were approached. I was approached by a super regional and to have breakfast, and
Hmm.
and I said, "Look, you don't have a great presence here. What's the reason why you really want to come and have breakfast with me from Florida?" And so he said, "Hey, I think we'd be a good pairing, it'd be a good match." And so I said, "I want to get permission from the board to go down the path." And so the board said, "Of course, we have nothing to lose." Well, what you have to lose is if you get two CEOs of companies getting together, somebody sees you in the
Right,
community,
right.
rumors start to fly.
Sure.
Well, so we did go down the path with them. It lasted about 4 months, and rumors started to fly, and that made it difficult to manage the business in some respects. And in the end, we ended up parting ways. There was a disagreement in price, um, but that got us to thinking about um, going down the path. But it wasn't until about a year later, probably 2015,
So
that we
kind of
said,
a failed journey kind of made you think about, okay, if it's not with them, this is what I would want if we were to do this. Fair. So
"Yeah,
just being
what
curious.
Yeah, what that prompted myself, and my CFO to do, we knew that this legal and regulatory cost was elevated, and what concerned me, just in theory, was, are we going to be able to provide the same types of returns to shareholders, of which I was the second largest at the time? Are we going to be able to provide returns to the shareholders that we have in the past going forward? And the analysis that we brought to the board demonstrated that for us to do that, we either needed to go out and buy somebody of our own size or larger, and it would take a lot of leverage to do it,
Hmm.
or we continue on the independent path and try to grow our way out of this. But we looked out, about 5 years, and we said, yeah, we can make money. We will provide a positive return to shareholders, but it doesn't appear that it's going to be the same kind of return that we've been used to over the last 15
Right,
years.
right.
That got the board, it got us thinking about strategically what is best for the shareholders and the employees. So that set us down the intentional path of going through the full scale sale process.
And what ultimately gave you the confidence that it was the right time?
Um, Markets were receptive. Interest rates were low at the time. Our businesses were actually very good. People make the mistake of selling when they uh, when things turn on them.
Yeah,
We could see that the next 2 or 3 years was going to be pretty good.
yeah.
It was after that time that I was concerned about the returns to shareholders. So, the environment just seemed to be right, and um, it took us probably took me about 6 months to not convince the outside directors. And this is the beauty of having a board that has outside directors. But it took a longer than expected time to convince the chairman, who's this again the son of the founder, to
Yeah,
get his head wrapped around selling the company,
right.
which
Oh
he,
my
which I
gosh.
think he never, I don't think he ever thought he would live long enough to see that, because he never had a desire to do it.
Right. So obviously, the buyer convincing you this is a good idea, then you had to convince yourself it was a good idea as a shareholder, and then you had to convince the chairman that this was a good idea. So you were
Yeah.
being sold to and you were selling, not in a bad way, but just like, hey, these are the points, these are things that we need to consider. And obviously 2017, you were able to get that, get it done. And, obviously it became very personal to you being a large shareholder, but also you weren't going to step away. So this was very personal to you. Tell us about that. Obviously, there's a financial decision, there's an emotional decision, then there's a work decision. So it's kind of three different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially I just kind of expected that I wasn't going to be part of Stifel, and
Mhm.
I just made that. I didn't want to make the assumption that I was going to be because I wasn't really going to be in control of that. In the end, I had known the CEO and the president, both of them, for about 15 or 20 years, based on being involved in our trade association. We were on some committees
Sure.
together, and but the toughest thing about this was just having this ongoing conversation with the chairman. And I understand it. This is his life. It was his
Mhm.
father's life. The emotion attached to that, was easy to understand. But what I impressed upon him at one point was, I said, John, listen, I understand what you're going through. I've been at this company more than half my life. Half my
Mhm.
life has been devoted to this company and what we're doing here. And I said, I've got some emotional attachment as well. But I said, there are times in companies' histories when it just appears that it's time to pull the trigger, and the need to find a partner is there. And I said, I really think we're there. But there were a number of conversations over time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Um,
Well, the
it's
ego is,
hard.
is very powerful, and
Yeah.
identity and, but you've got to really look at everything and really take a deep breath. I mean, I've had clients who, we're very close to closing and they're having anxiety about it, which they should. If it didn't matter, it probably isn't worth even doing. But, I've had times where I'm like, do we even want to move forward? Is this something, why don't you sleep on it? Let's talk tomorrow morning because, this is an emotional one-time event, high stakes one-time event. And you want to get it done right, especially like in your case, Mike, you're the one saying this is what we ought to do, and you're going to stick around and work there. So transaction happens. How long were you with the company post closing?
Yeah, I stayed with Stifel for 5 years. And one of the things that I really was, uh, the CEO and the president wanted to talk to me about my role with the company. And they said, we just want you with the transaction. You can do anything you want to do, whatever you think, where you think you can add value. And I said, I have one priority at the moment, and that is, if you don't mind, and that is, I want to make sure that everybody, every single person transitions well into Stifel. I said, let me focus on that, and then we can talk about me. I don't even care about compensation. That this is so important to our employees and their futures. It's what I need to do. And they were more than happy to let me do that. I didn't even go over to St. Louis, where Stifel is headquartered, until we closed in January. I went over there the end of March and spent a couple of days and put names with faces and got to meet some people that I hadn't met. And it was at that time that we talked about my official role and everything that went around it.
Yeah.
So, it's
But with those
that.
people in that regard, you know, great leaders, understand it's the people that help get them there. Um, I mean, how were you reassured that those people were going to be taken care of? Because obviously part of what a purchaser wants to do is gain some traction because, they don't, their expenses maybe go down. Maybe they can use their money. What made you feel confident they could do that for you?
There was a lot of conversation about the synergy and the cost saves that were pretty easy to see with us. We had an operations area that was almost completely duplicative of what Stifel would do in the home office. So
Hmm.
we knew those people were not going to make the cut. But the majority of the rest of the people were revenue producers. And so there was never any indication that those people wouldn't make the cut. I just
Sure.
wanted to make sure that they transitioned through from our system to their system well. You're trying to take care of clients every day, and if you don't have what appears to be a seamless transition to a new platform, it's going to be a mess
Right.
trying to take care of
And they
clients.
could be
So
easily picked off because those same clients are friends with other advisors. If it's, Morgan
absolutely,
Stanley or whatever, it'd be easy to say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to leave. So making sure that's seamless, no matter what business it is so critical.
well, and part of the story was the culture that I could see that was very similar to our culture, and that 5 years that I spent there verified all of that for me. But the other part of the story was the resources that a much larger firm, a much larger but still not, a mega firm, a much larger firm brought to the table for our advisors and our investment bankers. Much larger balance sheet to be talking about,
Sure.
strength, and then just internal resources that we had, but not in the way that Stiefel had. So, it's the culture and the resources. And this is what I was trying to impress upon our chairman, that this was important for our advisors and our investment bankers to be able to take care of clients in the future. It's a very competitive world out there, and having the resources that we were going to have access to with Stiefel, and there were other firms that were interested that would have provided the same resources, but Stifel's culture, in my opinion, was much closer than the other firms that were interested to
Yeah.
ours.
Yeah. And at the time of sale, like what was your assets under management? I mean, what were you managing as a group?
Oh, that's a pretty good question, and I want to say it was something like 4 billion,
Right.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So
Stifel's,
significant. And Stifel
but
was at the
oh,
time.
hundreds of billions,
Got it.
at
Yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
and now even much greater. So.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Well, great. Well, so okay. So you went through this. This was your career, and then it became, that you were managing the transaction. You get to the sale. You continue on. What advice would you give to someone if someone was selling their business or they were active in a business and they needed to go through what you went through? What would you tell them? What would be their first piece of advice you'd give?
Boy, doing due diligence, not just financial due diligence on the purchaser. Are they really who they say they are? And maybe having an advisor to help them do that. But also doing, qualitative due diligence on the major principles. If you're going to stay with the acquirer, you want to make sure that these are people that you can live with, that you can work with. If not, things get really messy really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing I would say is, look, you're not going to be in control. I mean, there are situations where that's not the case, but very few of them are. You're not going to be in control. You're not going to be making the decisions. You're not going to be king of the hill. You're probably not going to be helping to set strategy, which were all of those things were the things that really drove me as the CEO. So just understand that your world is about to change if you stay with this new acquirer. Um, and I don't like the idea, if I'm not in control and I'm not a decision maker, I don't want to have as much equity exposed or equity exposure as I had previously. When you're setting the tone, when you're using a board and an exec team to set direction, and you're the key person there, uh, I'm all in.
Yeah.
But when I'm not the guy or the person, I probably, suggest that you take some off the table,
That's
if
great
not all of them.
advice. No, that's great advice. And that's the thing. Like if they're not fully confident, they want to move forward, but they're not fully confident on who's going to take over, which is also a red flag too. But if they just feel like this is the right deal to do, like you said, make it less, have less skin in the future game, take as much as you can on the front end. But back to where you're at, take your time to due diligence on the buyer, make sure not just financially, but culturally, they would be a good match. So,
Yeah,
great advice.
I'll use a quick example of
Yeah.
that. So we had 3 transactions, 2 of which were done for cash, and then Stifel. My ownership was monetized in cash to a fair extent, but then we had the biggest piece, City Securities. We did a tax-free stock exchange with Stifel. So I kept the stock. Probably it's the largest position in my overall net worth still, but as a percentage, it's much less than it was when it was just City Securities. But that stock has tripled since the deal, and so that the old adage, it's the second bite of the apple. The
Mm-hmm.
reason that I have the exposure that I do is I have great confidence in the company, Stifel, and in their leaders, and they haven't disappointed me.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
familiar with the culture. So,
Yeah. And those second bite of the apple, I mean, right now, those aren't coming as regularly as the private equity world. Jamie Dimon was just talking about that. I mean, they're more like 5 to 7 years where they used to be 3 to 5 on these recaps and things like that. So
yep.
people really need to make sure they do their due diligence, that buyer is prepared to recap if the second bite is very important to the seller, which it usually is, obviously.
And to your point, for most people, this is a once in a lifetime thing. Most
Yeah.
people aren't serial entrepreneurs and, having several transactions over their lifetime. So, make the best of it.
Absolutely. That's incredible advice. Well, awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Now, we don't close until we get a golf tip from you, Mike. What are you working on the range? I've seen you pounding balls out there at Meridian Hills. Is there something you're working on that's helping you? It's spring, and it's just the beginnings of the year. What are you working on?
Well, one of my biggest problems is when I'm leaving balls out right, I
Okay.
find that I'm not close enough to the ball. And so there's a little hand drop drill that I do, and I got this tip from our pro a few years ago. I said I'm having trouble leaving these balls out right. I just feel like it's not a slice. I'm just leaving it out there. And so he had me hit some balls, and then he said, "Okay, I want you to take your stance." And he said, "Now drop your club and let your hands just go free." And then he goes, "Now put your hands together." And they were a lot closer to my body than they were when I initially set up. So I try to keep my hands in close to my body, almost as if they're part of the hip turn.
Yeah.
And
All right. A
that's
little more
that's been,
compact. A little more compact.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
pretty simple, and it probably is for you, but I never realized it, and it's really helped me. My misses are a lot better than they used to be because
There you
there's still a
go.
lot of misses.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, sometimes those little tips is all it takes,
Yeah.
and then you forget about them, and then you're like, well, okay, I got to remember to go back to that. So,
Yep.
great tip, and hey, great conversation, Mike. This is really inspiring, and congratulations, because there's no doubt that City Securities was just a critical, like I said, pillar in the city of Indianapolis, and to handle it the way you did, and to stay on, and to make sure it's doing well. Congratulations. So,
Well,
um,
well, thank you,
yeah.
Thad. I'm honored to be, one of your guests. I don't take anything for granted, and I love having these conversations. But I never thought you'd be interested.
It was great to have you. You did great. It was your first one ever, and I'm grateful you took the time. And I just want to say thanks again, and thanks to everybody for tuning in to Match Play. Feel free to share this with other people or invite people to follow us. But we'll see you next round. Thanks again, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Thad.
You got it.